Thunderbolts is directed by Jake Schreier and stars Florence Pugh, Sebastian Stan, David Harbour, and among others. And this is now the 36th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And in this story, it deals with Yelena, Bucky, John Walker, the Red Guardian, and all of them having to come together to essentially, well, if you see from the trailers, they end up having to work together in order to stop the forces of evil. Now, I'm just leaving it there because there's a lot more to it than that, and it becomes a lot more grounds for other things that I don't really want to go into detail, but it also involves a guy named Bob that's involved with it as well. And so, now here's a little backstory. Now, this movie is now the 36th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and what can I say? I'm not going to go into detail as I've discussed a lot of the other films in the MCU, but the MCU over the years since Endgame, I feel like has been on a up and down with a lot of films, depending on which one comes out. There's been some really good ones I've enjoyed, and there's been some other great ones I've enjoyed, and I've enjoyed the overall franchise itself. But I could definitely see that there's been every so often there's always going to be some really great ones, and there's some really not so good ones. So it's been up and M's whichever one comes out. And this was actually one that I was actually still on my radar for a while because I really enjoyed the way that it was trying to go with that whole type of ragtag team approach that they were doing with movies like the Guardians of the Galaxy or even some other stuff in DC like Suicide Squad and all that. So this was certainly one that felt like it was going to be a lot more grounded, so to speak, and not really do too much of relying on the superpower type of heroes that we have from the series. So it was certainly one that I really kept my interest. And so after upon seeing it, I can say that I was really blown away by this. This was certainly one of the better MCU films that I've seen in quite a while. And I really enjoy the way that we were able to still keep seeing these come along, especially since last year we had Deadpool and Wolverine come out, where it's good to see that Marvel, it seems like it's coming back on track with a lot of stuff. And it's got me really excited to see where they go down the line, because I'm definitely curious how they do with the new Fantastic Four coming out, and then also next year when we have Avengers Doomsday. But I'm really glad to see that they're still keeping things a lot more, back on, getting things in the right direction. Now, to get my pros out of the way, I really enjoy the cast. We're all top notch, especially Florence Pugh. What can I say? I can't get enough of her in a lot of films that she's done, especially her role in this franchise as Yelena from Black Widow. She really holds you around here, and I think that with her character, she gets probably the best type of arc in this, because she's having to deal with a lot of PTSD from not only the stuff that was involved with from Black Widow, but also just the way that she feels like the characters themselves in this, they really do feel like they're flawed. It really feels like she's not really getting anywhere, just doing the same type of job all the time and everything. And the way that the character goes along, the way that her arc goes along with this, especially with her having to team up with the other characters in this, and the advice that she gets from Red Guardian, I think it really shows a really commendable prowess for her story as it plays along. And then the rest of the characters all go through something like that too, especially seeing Bucky coming in as kind of basically the advice and having to be the second kind of leader of the group, having to help them out on some stuff. And then you also get, surprised enough, we get a good semi character arc with John Walker in this, who, keep in mind, when seeing him in Falcon the Winter Soldier, he's the kind of guy that he has that very kind of douchey quality to him where he's that character you just love to hate. But I'm glad here that he starts out like that for the most part, but he's still able to redeem himself later on, where he actually becomes a very likable guy. And I couldn't get enough of him. And the one that also stands out for me, the two that stand out for me the best are definitely Red Guardian, David Harbour's character in this. I thought he was just not only funny a lot like he was in Black Widow, but just the way that he has that very emotional integrity with trying to cope with Yelena, I thought was very not only heartwarming at times, it was very emotional too, especially when we get a part later on in the film that's very impactful. And then the other one that's really stood out for me the really best was Bob, played by Louis Pullman, who I've really come to really enjoy as an actor, and especially for a lot of the films I've seen. And he was not only very fun to watch, but it was not very engaging to watch, but just the kind of way that he plays his character with, trying to not really knowing where he comes from and stuff, but also when you see a lot more of the tragic backstory that he has, not only did I find it very engaging, but the way that it also plays into with his character, that this is not a spoiler because it's kind of given, where he essentially becomes the Sentry and stuff, I thought was really a good way of duality, the way it plays along with it. And to get more into my pros, I really got to appreciate the way the movie places it so where it's a lot more grounded, so to speak, where they have to essentially rely on their wits and having to use guns and all kinds of weapons to get through their way and stuff. And so they not only have fantastic chemistry together, but there's also some really cool twists and turns that happen throughout the film that I really kept myself engaged, especially how, well, not going to go into detail, but when it actually sets up with that, they don't start out as just basically having to work together. They actually they actually have to work their way in. They actually have to have something that sets it up for that. On top of that, I really got to appreciate that the movie goes into some on a very visual level. I got to really appreciate it, especially when we get into some stuff that involves with this this kind of thing that's called the void or whatever. The way it was kind of giving me flashbacks of that movie The Cell with Jennifer Lopez, because it pretty much puts like the character in this type of like mindset of seeing like their past and stuff, and seeing this very visual level where you're seeing like their younger versions of themselves in certain parts, and then you're also seeing like some really tragic stuff that happens that I thought was not only very visually compelling, but it kept me really into it to the way that it was coming along. But my biggest pro with this is how the movie takes into a very respectful manner of having to deal with grief and PTSD the most with a lot of our characters, because they're having to deal with a lot of stuff that goes down that with their past and everything that they're having to confront. And I think that the way that the movie plays into that very emotionally, it really got to me, and I really love how the characters also have to come to their senses and they realize their flaws throughout the film as well, which it really gives them a extra, depth to how everything plays into it. And the action scenes are also great too, especially a lot of the fight scenes, a lot of the shootouts that take place and all that. And we also get into some really great stuff that happens in the post-credit scene that I won't reveal, but it really sets up things really nicely, especially coming along in the future. So, and then the humor is also on point too, where the movie does kind of hold back on not trying to do too much compared to some of the other MCU films, which I appreciated, because it keeps it at a very minimum with not trying to overdo a lot of the comedy. That is something I will say on a little minor con. This is kind of where it falls into it, where I will say that some of the humor can be a little not hidden on some points, but that's to be expected with a lot of the MCU films because not every joke lands. And then there's also some other things I feel like that they could have really set up a lot better with, or maybe explored more with, especially things that involve with Ghost. And, you could also say the same thing when they bring in Taskmaster as well. But other than that, that's just some of my little tiny minor cons I had with, because overall I still really love this movie a lot, and it's going to definitely be on either my honorable mentions or one of my best of. And so with that, I'm going to give it a low phenomenal grade on the Film Freaks meter. So for those of you who've also seen Thunderbolts and the other films in the MCU, let me know in the comments of what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.